My name is Christy Rhodes, pronouns she, her. I am Operations Lead Program Manager on the AWS Disaster Response team. And I'm really excited to talk to you today about how our program, AWS Disaster Response, seeks to achieve and pursue positive social impact through the work that we do. Over the next hour or so, I'll be providing a high-level overview of the Disaster Response Program and what we do, including its three core components. We'll then hear from partner and close collaborator to the AWS Disaster Response Program, Help.ngo. We'll talk a little bit about our vision for the program's future, and then Q&A. AWS Disaster Response is part of a broader global social impact team. This team is comprised of other pillars, such as global public health and the work that we do around health equity, open data, and rights and equity. Our mission is to work with governments, nonprofits, multinationals, and other organizations which are active throughout the disaster lifecycle in order to support those communities which are impacted by those events. We do this by helping those organizations solve some of their biggest challenges using technology. The three primary ways that we do this through our program is, one, by helping them reduce the financial barrier to the cloud. We also do this through technical solution incubation and testing the art of the possible, leveraging AWS cloud technology, and also with support through employee volunteers and volunteer programs. So this first component, reducing the financial barrier and the barrier to accessing AWS cloud. One resource that we have is a pool of AWS credits. This can be redeemed in AWS accounts and applied towards a host of AWS services. In some cases, we explore credits as a way to reduce, or in some cases also remove, the financial barrier for our customers. Engaging organizations before a disaster occurs is extremely important, and we can't talk about disaster response without talking about preparedness. So our flagship preparedness credit program, Project Resilience, offers up to $5,000 in AWS credits to new and existing customers. This includes nonprofits, educational institutions, governments, multinational organizations, which are critical to a community's resilience. Again, up to $5,000 of credit are provided to these organizations, and the primary goal of this program is to ensure that these institutions are properly preparing for disasters and leveraging the AWS cloud to do so. So these credits are used to create a holistic disaster recovery plan in the AWS cloud. Customers who are interested in this can simply fill out our Project Resilience inquiry form. You can follow the QR code provided on the screen here, or you can search AWS Project Resilience. We also provide disaster response credits to support organizations actively responding to disasters or other large-scale crises, or organizations providing critical humanitarian services to communities and those impacted by these events. Near the beginning of the war in Ukraine, started in February of this year, we learned that Ukraine's leading online school platform, Optima School, began providing educational packages to K-12 students in Ukraine who are displaced by the war. As you can imagine, displaced populations, education is a critical service that's needed and a critical resource for those students. So in addition to working across AWS to help them migrate critical workloads and help them do that work, we also provided AWS disaster response credits to support that work to ensure that they could focus on their mission and not be as concerned about who's going to pay the bill. So whether we're helping scale a donation website to handle increased traffic, or supporting the deployment of an Amazon Connect resource hotline, or anything else related to disasters, AWS disaster response credits provide support to those organizations. The technical focus of our team is addressing capability gaps in the humanitarian assistance and disaster response space. We do this using the AWS cloud in the disconnected edge and in the cloud. Our team collects use cases directly from our customers, and we develop proof of concepts, or POCs, using a combination of AWS cloud and off-the-shelf commodity hardware that's easily accessed by our customers. Some examples of proof of concepts that our team has developed include streaming live drone footage to an AI ML model at the edge, combining 7 clustered Snowball Edge devices, which are equipped with GPU acceleration and additional automation workloads to reduce drone imagery processing time from multiple days it would normally take in a disconnected or limited connectivity environment to just a matter of hours. And also augmenting traditional situational awareness capabilities using AWS IoT technologies and commodity sensors. So in addition to typical end user devices, we built integrations with other sensors which provide more data in real time to incident command groups that are making operational decisions in the field. If you're interested in particular in learning more about IoT technologies, I recommend you consider joining session IoT 101, Innovate with IoT on AWS. This session is held immediately after this event, actually, this session. It's co-led by the AWS Disaster Response Technical Lead, and it starts at 2:50 in room 152A. Recreating a realistic environment for testing is the preferred means of collecting data about an experimental idea. In our case, our primary testing environment and the center of gravity for the disaster response program is our field test exercise program. We know we can't serve our customers who are responding to disasters and other crisis events by sitting behind a desk. So every 10 or so weeks, and with much preparation and partnership across AWS and Amazon, our team loads up, heads to a remote area. Thus far, they've been held in Virginia, where resources are scarce, connectivity is limited, and terrain's a challenge. Our team tests a host of concepts at these events, and we oftentimes invite other response organizations to co-innovate and test with us in the field. We also utilize this as a training ground for our employee volunteers, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a second. Our employee volunteers are trained on field-relevant AWS technology, from team awareness kits or TAC to our drone flight school program. We want to ensure that our volunteers have the skill set to enhance response teams using AWS technology. And all experiments need a laboratory, and if you visited the L Street Bridge, you probably couldn't miss it if you wanted to. The AWS Disaster Response Jeep Gladiator. Image is in the center here. This fully customized, uplifted disaster response Jeep integrates Snow family devices, networking, communications, and IoT gear into what we refer to as our rolling lab. This customized off-road vehicle enables our team to deploy side-by-side in the field with our customers. We can bring AWS technology, which is specifically tailored to humanitarian use cases, and bring that out in the field with us. So, for example, post-disaster imagery is incredibly important in understanding the impact that, for example, a severe weather event has on an area. So with our rolling lab, we can arrive at the disaster site, we can collect drone imagery, display the drone feed live on screen, and process that imagery at the edge using powerful compute capacities provided by the Snowball Edge. Getting that output quickly into the hands of the community's decision makers is incredibly important, and we're able to do that with our rolling lab. If you haven't already, please consider visiting the Disaster Response Jeep. Again, it's on the L Street Bridge, and our team is giving interesting demos that showcase Elemental, IoT and Greengrass, and Snow family devices, including the Snow Cone and AWS Snowball Edge. Another core component of our program is our massive base of employee volunteers. We leverage our employee base to support organizations active throughout the disaster lifecycle as well. One example of this is our close partnership with the Humanitarian OpenStreetMap team. If you're unfamiliar with humanitarian mapping, this is a critical resource needed by governments and response agencies in understanding populations that live in a certain area and that might need resources after a disaster event occurs or in order to prepare for those events. Most of us are used to pulling out our phones and pulling out a map application. However, an estimated 1 billion individuals around the globe are living in areas that are otherwise unmapped or unidentifiable on these maps. So HOT, again, Humanitarian OpenStreetMap team, is a nonprofit dedicated to humanitarian response through open source mapping. So each month, the Disaster Response Program hosts static volunteer opportunities for AWS and Amazon employees, wherein our volunteer employees are trained on humanitarian mapping through HOT's Tasking Manager, which is a UI that is supported by the AWS Disaster Response Credit Program and which also runs entirely on AWS. So during these sessions, volunteers are trained on tracing satellite imagery and their changes are immediately updated on open source mapping, which can then be used by communities all around the globe. We're several years into this partnership now, and thus far, this year alone, employees have contributed thousands of hours to training and mapping through our Mapathon program. So in addition to static volunteer opportunities, we also monitor for active disasters and actively look for ways for our employees and our volunteers to support organizations responding to those events. For example, many of you are likely aware of the tornado outbreak that swept across central and southern US December of last year, impacting upwards of 10 states, generating 50 tornadoes, and unfortunately taking the lives of 88 individuals. So our team, in response to that, conducted calls with an organization called Crisis Cleanup. Crisis Cleanup is an AWS-powered coordination website and hotline wherein individuals who are impacted by a severe weather event can call, place requests for support with basic disaster cleanup like hauling debris to the curb, removing trees, things like that. And then response agencies and volunteers in the community can then respond to those requests, helping them with those tasks that they otherwise might not be able to complete. So our volunteers conducted and fielded those phone calls. We also mapped 2 hard-hit communities in Kentucky using HOT's Tasking Manager, completing projects that were requested by our deployment partner, Help.ngo, who we'll hear from a little bit later. And mapping these areas using pre-disaster imagery helped the broader response community get a better understanding of the extent of the damage caused. We also maintain the AWS Disaster Response Action Team. This is a FEMA-trained team of employee volunteers who deploy either on the ground alongside trusted organizations or virtually in support of those deployed teams. Volunteers are redirected from their day jobs for up to 2 weeks. Technical volunteers might deploy and manage drone imagery processing. They might help install interim connectivity and communications networks while critical communications infrastructure is being restored. And virtual volunteers might provide program management support, architecture guidance for cloud environments, or monitor deployed teams using common operating picture proofs of concepts developed by the disaster response team. For example, in response to the same tornado outbreak previously mentioned, we deployed 6 disaster response action teams volunteers alongside Help.ngo in Kentucky. The team helped collect imagery from more than 20 drone flights, provided high compute capacity Snowball Edge devices, and enabling the team to process 2D and 3D imagery in a matter of just minutes. Simultaneously, we deployed a 7th disaster response action team volunteer alongside IT Disaster Resource Center, ITDRC, again to help restore connectivity in communities impacted in Kentucky. Now I'd like to hand the mic over to Help.NGO, a close collaborator and partner with the AWS Disaster Response, the Disaster Response team. We've got Adam Marlat, Director of Operations from Help.NGO, flew all the way in from Poland to speak with you today. Adam?
So today we're going to talk a little bit about what Help.NGO does, how we collaborate together with AWS and other solutions providers, and then how that actually makes a difference in the field. So a little bit of a background. Help.NGO, we're an international non-governmental organization, so we're a nonprofit organization. We're also what's called a United Nations standby partner. And so what that means is in critical situations where experts on mission or service packages are required, we're actually seconded directly to the UN system to try to enable them as quickly as possible. And so we do that through a variety of different things in terms of process change or different technologies that we can put in place. And so with that, a lot of what we do in terms of our partnership with AWS sits around three core areas. So you've seen some of the field training exercise stuff that recently came up. One of the cool things that we're able to actually do is take our direct feedback of what hasn't worked in the past and co-innovate with Amazon to be actually coming up with solutions that we then pre-position and deploy out. And we'll talk about that a little bit later when we go into the Ukraine situation. We've grown a lot in terms of our partnership and our technical capacity over the last few years. So this really first started evolving in 2019. So there was a series of cyclones that actually hit Mozambique, and we identified that we had a significant gap. We were deploying satellite internet to different areas, but we were using up all of that bandwidth just trying to get data in and out. And it became really clear to us that we needed to try to leverage a different compute solution that could actually allow us to more efficiently use these expensive resources, right? Because airtime on satellites is quite limited. And so we basically became down this journey of trying to understand what is it can we use at the edge to give us a lot better computing capacity, and how can we best leverage our different resources that are there. And so over time, this continued to evolve from just how do we do high-speed drone processing at the edge, to how do we leverage various different tools that normally would be out of reach or would be quite difficult. And I think it's been really cool to work together with the Disaster Response Program to identify how not only can our team use these, but how can we actually either pre-position these tools virtually or enable other partners to use them directly. And so one of the things that we always have to look at is when is it appropriate for us as an organization to activate? So sometimes it's straightforward because of that standby partnership mechanism. We'll get asked by a United Nations agency to come forward. Other times, like in the situation in Kentucky that was just mentioned, the local government might actually come to us, or state government, or FEMA domestically. It was quite clear in kind of the case study that we're going to talk today about in Ukraine. We actually got a series of different requests from the government of Poland, from the region, from the voivodeship, and then also directly from the United Nations. One of the cool things that we were able to rapidly deploy out is one of these vehicles here that we'll be talking about, and we'll kind of go through a little bit of that operation. One of the things that we're asked about quite frequently is why AWS? So beyond this program, I think the thing that's really unique about the cloud, and particularly about AWS, is a lot of the different enabling solutions that are built and can integrate together. Some of the stuff that you'll see here is also the edge hardware, which I think is also a bit unique compared to a lot of the other solutions that we also try to use. One of the things that we really have to look at when we are deploying out is what is the right solution and not who is the right vendor. So a lot of what we go to do, and what I really enjoy about our partnership with Amazon, is we have the flexibility to use the right tool at the right time with the right partner to be able to get things done on the ground. And so there's no hesitation in terms of using various different satellite providers, using different cloud enabled services, and things that sit even outside of AWS, just to be able to ensure that we can get operations going as quickly as possible. And so we'll talk a little bit about this in the Ukraine situation and how we were able to leverage some of these tools to immediately respond. This here is at the Medyka border crossing, which is one of the furthest south border crossings of Poland. This, at the peak situation in Ukraine, was experiencing a refugee caseload of 40,000 people per day crossing over on foot in temperatures that were essentially freezing. At a few different points it was snowing. One of the things that we were able to rapidly do was take equipment that we had pre-positioned out to be able to provide connectivity, and then also using actually the AWS regional office, get in contact with an MNO, so a cellular provider, to be able to actually put up a station and issue SIM cards to people for free. So some of the things that I'm going to talk today specifically on the Ukraine response is how we were able to rapidly mobilize and some of the different technology solutions that we've provided. So ironically enough, when this situation actually first started, we were all the way over in Rio de Janeiro because we had been asked by the government to come in and do some mapping. So we were actually deployed out when the situation happened, including several of our Polish staff, who some of them have language capability both in terms of Russian and Ukrainian. So we actually had to redeploy back all the way to Poland. At the same time, we were able to actually deploy people out from our staff. So less than 5 hours after this started, we had already had people deployed to Krakow, which is where the initial operations center was being set up for the humanitarian system, as well as to 4 of the key border crossing points to better understand what the situation was and what our anticipated outflow would be. We then immediately got an ask from the United Nations to help in terms of launching what's called the cluster system. So this system is in place to handle various core functions. It's very similar to ESFs if you're familiar with emergency support functions. So the logistics cluster was activated because it was clear that this was going to be a massive response, and we reached out to Amazon to see how they could help us, both in terms of their more traditional program, which is the Disaster Response by Amazon program, and also AWS with some of the solutions that we were able to go. One of the other ways that we were able to actually operate so fast is we have equipment that's pre-positioned in different parts of the world. And we were able to actually directly deploy this out, which allowed us to quickly get in place and to support our different partners on the ground. So here you can kind of see 2 of the different things that we were able to do to actually increase the speed of the response. So using this partnership and some of the different modalities that we have on the ground, we were able to deploy ground vehicles that you can see on the left, and also air assets to be able to move key personnel in. So this included, in this particular instance on the left, is David Beasley. He's the executive director of WFP, that we were able to get into Ukraine and on the ground as quick as possible. Now they're currently feeding over 3 million people a day. And a lot of that has been sped up by the different technologies that have enabled them to actually communicate the critical needs on the ground. The other side of things that we were talking about was also getting the logistics set up, right? Because one of the core challenges is even if you have amazing solutions that are sitting at the cloud, you need to be able to connect, and also you need a device that can do it. So we were able to actually leverage this program and deploy computers, secure cell phones, and other devices to get people going immediately. So you can see some examples of this here. This is some of the supplies that came in from that program, and you can even actually see some of the AWS volunteers who weren't afraid to get dirty and help sort through all of this stuff to get the operation going. The other thing that we were able to do with AWS is in near field operations, deploy subject matter experts to Poland, which helped us to actually in real time get different solutions stood up. So one of the things that became very clear was that we would need secure telecommunications. And we would need redundant communications because there were cyber attacks that were occurring both in Poland and in Ukraine that were a real hindrance to operations. And so this is Paul, one of the volunteers, working straight through the night to actually get this stood up for us. One of the other things that we were able to do was be able to deploy out that connectivity. So on the right, you can see some satellite terminals being brought in, and that was on, I think, day 7 of the response. And on the right, and on the left side, that was us in Dnipro coordinating where those different terminals would go out. This allowed us to deploy connectivity to Lviv, Odessa, Vinnytsia, Dnipro, and then now into Kyiv. The other aspects of what we've been doing is we've been leveraging these different solutions to really enable other partners on the ground that have mandates to be able to provide assistance. So for instance, UNHCR, which is responsible for refugee management, UNICEF, the World Food Program, as you can kind of see here. None of this operations on the ground would be possible without this connectivity and the ability to securely and safely communicate what these critical needs are back from these field locations. So here you can see the wide area of different things that we've had to do. On the left side is some of our pre-positioned kits. And on the right side is actually gas station equipment that we had to put together because the country's currently almost out of fuel. So in terms of what we have to go and do, it's different in every disaster and every response, but having these tools and almost prepackaged solutions gives us the capability to be flexible enough to fill any void that might come up. The other interesting thing that we were able to do and that we were tasked with was secure telecommunications. So here are a series of armored vehicles that are used by the United Nations. We have been essentially enabling aspects of peace talks by providing secure telecommunications that have allowed senior level personnel to come in and have those negotiations. So this photo was taken a few moments after the United Nations Secretary General met with the President of Poland. And then we then took our communications truck, which is the Suburban, you can see 4 vehicles back, and we were able to actually take him directly to Kiev so he could have dialogue bilaterally with President Zelensky. And here you can see different aspects of communications that we do, not only in terms of terminals that are deployed, like the satellite terminal on the left, but on the right side you can also see different things that we're able to do with essentially encrypted phones. So we're using commercial off-the-shelf product powered by cloud solutions, so in this case Wickr, to actually give us that flexibility. And those phones are currently being deployed to key personnel, including the personal protection detail of the SG, of the United Nations Secretary General. And so this has given us the flexibility where we would normally have to use satellite phones and other more expensive technologies. And it's allowed us to actually insert these more cost-effective solutions and at no cost to the other users. So in this case, the United Nations and several different NGOs that are deployed. So here, this is when we cross back over. This is our team that was on the ground to enable that operation. And as a result of the immediate dialogue that occurred, they were able to open up humanitarian access, which also leveraged this technology to evacuate personnel, civilians from Mariupol, and now the complete retrograde of all fighting in that area. You can see in kind of other examples here some of the technical pieces that we deploy out. We're able to leverage the cloud to deploy an instance of Team Awareness Kit. Also, we have Wickr, which is this encrypted chat, which is also available on the cloud. And on the right side, one of the things that we're now starting to do is cross over and be able to use a combination of both traditional VHF radio technology that humanitarians use for security telecoms, and combine that with what you see here, which is actually satellite technology. And so the cloud solution that we have allows us to bridge both of these pieces together. So that way, even in a situation where if a cell phone tower goes down or the radio network goes down, we have multiple layers of redundancy and everybody can talk to each other. One of the core tools that we've been able to do is leverage different cutting-edge solutions like software-defined wireless network capability to have that level of redundancy that's required. So in this particular instance, this was a bit of a small and scrappy deployment that we did into those armored vehicles. Using an inverter, some off-the-shelf equipment, we were able to have failover from traditional LTE all the way back to a Kymeta terminal running on Intelsat to give us that backhaul regardless of where we were, because we had to drive with the Secretary General over locations that had no coverage or denied coverage. And so what we were able to do is we were able to acquire this Suburban. We mounted that internet terminal on top. We had the software-defined WAN on the back, and then we were able to cross over between both of these. So in the photo on the right, you can see that's the President of Poland, his motorcade returning. That's one of the helicopters that we were using. And then that is our vehicle being deployed, so that's at the Medica border crossing. One of the other interesting things that we do that Christy had mentioned earlier is particularly around situational awareness. So beyond just traditional connectivity, you also need to know where your staff are, especially in potentially dangerous environments and complex settings like conflict. So one of the things that we've been able to do is inside of our account is deploy an instance of Team Awareness Kit that allows us to overlay various different situations, including where our people are, where checkpoints are, where are red zones that we shouldn't be going through, and we can do this in real time. So we can flag a potential area, or we know if for some reason somebody is out of a zone, that we make sure that they're okay. This is one of the things that we've continued to roll out and that we're also starting to integrate external partners in, even in a zero trust environment, where they're able to use their own instance on their direct account as well. And so you can see aspects of that Team Awareness Kit on the left. And on the right side of things, you're able to see two of our Snowball Edge devices, the devices that you also can see upstairs today in the Jeep. And these are currently being positioned in Kiev, and there's some aspects of infrastructure mapping that we've begun doing, and so we're processing that directly in the capital. And so basically, the next thing that we would talk about is what do we plan to do next? And I think the thing that's really complicated with conflict is we don't know what's going to happen next, right? It's very straightforward in disaster response when we know that there's an earthquake and we know that there's a path to recovery. I think the biggest challenge that we have at the moment is we really need to look forward and understand what could happen next and how can we pre-position knowing what the current status is. So one of the things that we see in terms of being able to continue that response is specifically looking at if this conflict shifts, will we have the resources in place to ensure that staff are safe, that we can still continue to get the ground truth in terms of where resources and other food items and non-food items are going, and how can we ensure that those operations can continue and have that level of continuity. I think that that's going to be a real challenge, but at the same time, I think I'm optimistic, knowing that these initial solutions that we've deployed can actually be also replicated internal to other organizations. So going forward, we plan on actually taking this in terms of, for instance, the tactical awareness kit, or the team awareness kit rather, the Wicker instance, and some of the other tools, including the hardware solutions, and actually pre-positioning them in different locations as access becomes available. So with that, I know that you have one more, so I'll hand it back over to Christy.
Just as important as what the AWS disaster response team does is why we do it. You may have heard of the concept of leadership principles. These are a set of guiding statements that we use across Amazon and AWS to help enable our large global organization to uphold our unique culture. Although our team existed before one of the newest LPs was added in July of 2021, Success and Scale Bring Broad Responsibility, this particular LP really resonates with our team and empowers us to continue doing what we do. I won't read the whole quote to you or the whole leadership principle, but the piece that really stands out: we must begin each day with a determination to make better, do better, and be better for our customers, our employees, our partners, and the world at large, and we must end every day knowing we can do even more tomorrow. Our mission as the disaster response team is purely humanitarian in nature, with the goal to be a proactive force for good, sharing AWS's superpowers and technical capital to drive positive social impact where it's needed most. As we plan for the future of AWS disaster response and the disaster response action team, some of the things we're working towards include helping organizations build their capacity through AWS cloud training and upskilling, enabling them to ultimately improve their response capabilities using field-tested proofs of concept and AWS cloud technology. We'll be scaling our field test exercise program not only as a way to test the technical prototypes that our team develops, but as a full-fledged training program for our employee volunteers who, whether deploying independently as the AWS Disaster Response Action Team or supplementing the response of other organizations, will enhance those responses with their technical skills and state-of-the-art AWS technology. We'll also use it as a mechanism to leverage the superpowers across Amazon and AWS, including our infrastructure, logistics, cloud technology, and product offerings, and also utilizing field test exercises as a community service, wherein we can cross-train, co-innovate, co-test in the field with other response organizations in an environment that makes sense. Our team will continue innovating on behalf of our customers, investing heavily in research and development to make AWS the most trusted cloud service provider for response operation workloads. If you'd like to learn a little bit more about some of the proofs of concepts that our team has developed or are currently working on, you can see some of those articles posted here. More information on this is also available at our booth, again, where the disaster response Jeep is located on the L Street Bridge, and our team is happy to talk through these specific use cases. give you just a second for those of you who'd like to capture those QR codes. We encourage you to get engaged with our training and certification content today. You can scan one or both of these codes to get more information on some of the cloud training programs available. And I'd like to thank you for joining today. I'd like to open it up for Q&A if you have any questions. Adam, if you'd like to join me.
Sure.
Anybody have any questions? If not, we're happy to follow up with you after the session as well. Our team will be manning the disaster response Jeep on the L Street Bridge for the remainder of the conference, and we'd love to talk with you more about your use cases and how we might partner with you as the AWS Disaster Response Program. Okay, great. Thanks, folks. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.